Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Mr. Tiego Thotse. Tiego, how are you doing, sir?
Good things. And how are you, Nick, sir? Hi there,
I'm
Gabriel,
cold,
sir.
but I hear in Limpopo where you are, it is nice and warm.
Yeah, it's nice and warm this side. We are quite blessed.
You know, the smugness of Limpopo, I tell you, it's something else. Anyway, we are also joined, of course, by Mr. Gabriel Crouse. Gabriel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm jealous. I'm feeling jealous, frankly.
Yes, but we
Jealous
will swallow
and
our
miffed.
jealousy.
Yes.
We'll swallow our jealousy and go forward. I first want to give a quick shout out to there's a pharmacy in Joburg that I've been to a couple of times. I know that there is a listener to the show who works there. I hope he's all right, because I know they had a robbery a few days ago, and I saw the video of the robbery today, and it was some hectic stuff. So anyway, I hope you're all okay, and that nothing too terrible happened to you guys.
Yes. Can I second that and say that's the pharmacy that delivered the goods that got me through COVID. So thank you very much, and it includes that terrible medicine that we won't mention. Anyways, I hope everyone gets better.
All right, so we're going to start off with a little update on the evil machinations that Gabriel is up to. Gabriel, you are the Institute of Restoration's head of campaigns. What are you currently getting involved in?
So at this minute, our attorneys are going over the final draft of a letter that we'll be sending to the president as soon as this podcast is over. And the letter is basically to ask for a disclosure. Everyone knows about the Phala Phala scandal, the mattress millions, the cash stash, Dollargate.
The couch millions as well.
Okay. The couch millions. Okay, the mattress millions is more onomatopoeic, even if it's less furniture-wise accurate. But the point is that there was a very interesting thing that came out of that. One of the many is that Ramaphosa, for the first time in a very long time, faced public questions live and in front of cameras. And the very first questions that he faced in that very long presser, he had quite a serious exchange, I think, with an SABC journalist, Couch Cache, about the Couch Cache. And he said, he was asked about the timing. They said, isn't it strange that the process that empowers you to suspend Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane started in March? So it was long ago. So long ago that it's hard to see how the beginning of that process is what prompted you all of a sudden to suspend her. And yet what happened very recently, only the day before, is that Busisiwe Mkhwebane opened an investigation into the Couch Cache Phala Phala cash stash story. And Ramaphosa's comeback, in essence, was that this is a pure and stunning coincidence. And that, in fact, Busisiwe Mkhwebane and he have been engaging with many, many letters ever since March up until May in a process that has had deadlines and has had timelines, and that if you look into that, you'll see, and I quote him directly, it was not really even linked to the investigation that she argues she has launched in regards to the robbery at the farm. The issue of timing has to be looked at in the historic processes that had taken place. Now, we hear the president, and we wonder about the evidence. And I thought to myself, maybe you're not allowed to look at this correspondence, but the president said, and I quote him directly, all these processes, and the only process was correspondence. Sorry, all these processes were open, were public, and there was nothing underhand or hidden. So that means that the president has said that this correspondence is out there, that it's transparent, that it's not hidden, and our attorneys are requesting that we can see it. There might be a link that we have missed somewhere on a government website to display all of this. So we want that link, or we'll just take the correspondence directly, and we'll share that with you, our listeners, and with the rest of the South African public. Because on the one hand, you've got this big worry that the president has suspended someone the day after an investigation has opened up into him. And there's only really one way to put away that worry, and that's with the evidence and transparency. And so that's what we're calling for. Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. And I hope that the president provides us with all that information. I'm sure it's sitting in his inbox. Shouldn't be too difficult to get a hold of. All right, so let's start off with our first story today. And this is a call from the EFF regarding a story that came to light, I think, sort of yesterday morning. And this is the sentencing of a person for electoral fraud in the last local government elections. So a woman called Nomusa Gabuza, who's 37, apparently, according to the court findings, voted 24 times for her political party at a voting station that she was also the presiding officer of. So for those who are not so clear, presiding officers are basically the IEC official who runs every single voting station in the country. So every voting station, every school, every container, every tent, everything has one presiding officer who ultimately gets to make the decisions on the ground. They can overrule the sort
Nick,
of... other
can I jump in there? Some of the elections are run from containers.
Yeah. If you go to the sticks, you'll find all sorts of odd things set up to be shipping containers, that kind of stuff, to be voting stations. The worst is tents, because sometimes shenanigans go on where the boxes are put up against the walls of the tent and then someone tries to take them. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is someone who's been convicted, and I'm sure she's going to face some kind of big legal penalty now. But in response to this, the economic freedom fighters have said that they are going to ensure that going forward, that there are no members of the South African Democratic Teachers Union, or SADTU, who will be appointed as presiding officers anywhere in the country. Now, that's a bit of a tall order. Political parties do have some say over who gets appointed as a presiding officer. But it's an interesting point, actually, and for once I find myself sort of agreeing a little bit with the EFF here. A lot of presiding officers across the country are teachers, because a large number of voting stations around the country are in schools. And the biggest teachers union, I think, is SADTU, and it is, of course, aligned to the ANC and COSATU. So there is, I think, something to be said here, because if you really did want to steal an election, and I don't think there's been any real attempt in South Africa, but if you really did, the best way to do it would be to make sure that every single presiding officer in the country was on your side, because you can cause an enormous amount of chaos that way, overrule sort of party agents, and cause problems. And this also echoes, I think, some sentiments made by Tera Lakota of COPE, I think it was. I'm recalling from memory here, so I may be misattributing this, but he said that our elections, that the fundamental threat to our elections was the fact that SADTU had a massively outsized role when it came to counting the votes and ensuring free and fair elections at each voting station. So, Tiego, let me start with you. What do you make of the call by the EFF here? Do you think I'm being hysterical when I say that SADTU has too much of an influence on our elections?
Well, I think anyone could do what this woman did, and they could do it for whichever party of their choosing, really. And so I think what's important is that we do come up with, I actually think we do already have those mechanisms, right? What we need are mechanisms that will ensure that these people cannot go ahead with what they intend to do. But I must say about SADTU that it has been of serious concern to me as well, that we have many of these presiding officers being members of SADTU, being members of the African National Congress. I contested in local government elections in the year 2021, and the presiding officer at our particular branch was a well-known ANC member. A few days before elections, he was seen going into ANC local offices in Grahamstown, just days before elections. So it becomes concerning that you have such people presiding over our elections, but really it becomes hard to prevent the whole thing altogether, because it could be done by anyone. They could come take Gabriel today, make him the presiding officer, and he could choose on his own to give votes to whatever party of his choosing. So really the answer lies in coming up with strong mechanisms of preventing these things.
I think also a big role to play here is that of political parties and observers who might want to, you can, I think, as an independent person apply, or at least an independent organization apply to observe elections. It is that story you talked about, the presiding officer hanging out at ANC offices and stuff a few days before. That's not the first time I've heard a story like that by a long shot. I remember I think it was the 2016 election. There was a voting station in Soweto where the presiding officer and the ANC candidate arrived together in the same car. They were each other's carpool, which is not, doesn't
That's
really
beyond same WhatsApp group. That is
yes. Gabriel, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we always sit in this difficult position where we don't want to undermine faith in our ballot box, especially here, because I really, really, really want people to get out and vote. I think we had a huge change election in 2021, and I think we've got an even bigger change election coming up in 2024. I did not vote in my 20s until I was like 27, 28 or something, statistically about as normal as you can get. But I know that feeling, like you don't vote, you don't feel like it's the thing to do. And then at some point, you just got to get up and be part of changing the system that's not working, I think. So I don't want to discourage, but at the same time—
This podcast is a rare place that 66% of the participants have run for office at a younger age than one of the participants has voted.
Yes, indeed. You guys were much more engaged. I was, I think, a very typical South African who thought, oh, politics, what a headache, leave me alone. I'll talk about it maybe over a beer or a glass of wine. But thinking that anything could change for the better, nah, that's just silly. Anyway, one realizes when one looks around that things can definitely get worse. I think that's a good reason to get involved, if nothing else. If they can get worse, they can get better. So it's important not to fully undermine the credibility of the electoral process. But yeah, part of democracy requires voting. Part of democracy requires guarding the guardians, checking in on the vote. I think the track record of the IEC has been to get worse and worse, more and more incredible. There were polls coming out last year that showed that its credibility had halved basically in the last decade, from 60-70% of people thinking it's super bulletproof to only about 30% of people thinking it's bulletproof. I always like to point out that the voting roll in the last two national elections, the municipal one and the one for the national parliament, you had a larger number of people registered to vote in the 80 plus age group than South Africans alive in that age group. So the voters' roll is not being cleared up in a proper fashion. But it's not just the IEC. In fact, I would say the biggest disasters in terms of running the elections in the last year, and maybe in the last couple of years, have actually been coming from Parliament and the executive, the ANC-run Parliament and the ANC-run executive. I'm saying the ANC specifically because of the connection to the majority vote required to allow independent candidates to run, as the Constitutional Court has ordered Parliament must do. Parliament was given 24 months to do that, hasn't managed to do that. It's amazing how slow they are. Concord has given them an extra 6 months. And the other one, of course, is the attempt last year by the executive to subvert the national municipal elections by a premature declaration, which would create a constitutional crisis, which they thought might get the thing postponed indefinitely. And we might be heading for phase 2 of that now. If Parliament doesn't do its job, we will be heading for phase 2 of that. And I think in both instances, the Concord, at the very least, has been tough on Parliament and on the executive and on the IEC, and said, guys, it's just not good enough. South Africa's democracy founding value is that every citizen gets to vote if they want to. So make it happen. And they don't just get to vote, they get to vote in regular elections, which means you can't actually postpone it.
Tiego, any final thoughts before we move on?
Well, my final thoughts are that the ANC is quite corrupt, so we must expect that they will try to find ways of using presiding officers as people who could assist them with votes moving forward. I know this for a fact. I mean, these people from Limpopo to the Eastern Cape, Gauteng, I've sat with some of their members, and it's what they always discuss, how to cheat, how to steal and stuff of that nature, So we must political parties must keep a close eye on the ballot boxes come 2024. But I do trust that we have a working system. If only the people could support it, it should work.
Yeah, I think that the groups that really do need to step up in the next election is civil society more broadly, to do what they can to make sure that voting procedures are followed. So apply, if you run some sort of organization, apply to be a party agent. I think it's a noble thing. It's also very interesting. I've done it a whole bunch of times. It's a lot of fun. Well, sort of most of the time.
Even the bits that aren't fun, you've had good stories to tell. Like, my sense is that
mostly there are some days where it's a bit dull, but generally speaking, it's pretty good. So I'd highly recommend it. And also, you'll learn a lot about the country and our election process. The rules as they exist are for the most part pretty good, I think. All we need to do is make sure that they are upheld. Okay, so let's move on to our next story, and this is the sort of final, I guess, nail in the coffin for this court case, this drama that's been going on. So, of course, during COVID, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and government issued a regulation, I think it was Regulation 45, which banned the sale of tobacco products across the country during the COVID lockdown. It didn't last forever. But while it was in place, anyone who wanted to have a smoke had to turn to the black market and purchase illegal cigarettes. A lot of members of civil society, particularly the tobacco companies, understandably were fairly freaked out by this and took the minister, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, to court. And they managed to win, showing that her regulation was without any supporting evidence. She appealed that court victory, and as of yesterday, the Supreme Court of Appeal rejected her appeal, saying, no, you were completely wrong. You didn't have any evidence. This is rubbish. They found that basically it had not been established as evidence that the tobacco ban would have any effect on COVID-19, and that short-term quitting of smoking was not really going to affect your health outcomes very much when it came to COVID. Gabriel? I don't know whether you're still smoking, but at the time you were a smoker, and this really annoyed you. I'm sure you're feeling a little bit chuffed that the courts have agreed with you on this one.
I'm delighted. I really am. Schadenfreude is not pretty, but it was just so flagrant. I think part of what's important about this is that for most South Africans, the story starts with the bizarre news that to fight COVID-19, we're going to ban cigarettes, coming from Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. And then, just in case it didn't seem bizarre enough, you have this explanation that when people zol, it's the saliva on the paper.
Yes, and that's how they're spreading the COVID.
that spreads the COVID.
It did produce an awesome song.
Yes, and the Kiffness then adapts that, makes a nice beat, makes an awesome song that goes viral around the world. South Africa becomes the butt of a joke, a sort of cigarette butt of a joke. In the meanwhile, addicts, smokers like me, were put in a very nasty position, actually, because you suddenly have to spend a lot more to get a pack of cigarettes because it's all illicit. You're funding at times, like you feel like you're helping friends out, but at times it feels like they're pretty dodgy people that you're supporting. The quality of the cigarettes gets much worse. At some point, I was smoking Malimbo, which is like a Hong Kong Marlboro. that really felt so bad. Like I almost retched as soon as I took the second puff, because the bleach, you really are getting to the point where it's not just the long-term unhealthiness. It's like this thing is being bleached in like newspaper paper bleach, and the stuff inside is a combination of tea leaves and all kinds of not great stuff. I also spoke to people in and around Pietermaritzburg, where there's a cigarette factory that was constantly churning out illicit stuff, and which became a bit of a seedbed for quite serious crimes. We know the amount of illicit trade that took place, the amount of revenue lost from the fiscus because of the taxes that didn't go through. just up and down the line, all kinds of bad things, as well as a couple of studies coming out of France suggesting that actually smoking while having COVID is, or just at the point where you catch it, is probably better for you. Let's not get into that. The point is, to me, what's really impressive about this finding against her is that the courts have said, look, what you try to do is irrational. You saw a problem in society, COVID is a problem, and you try to tackle that problem. But it's not good enough to say, here's a problem, and here's what I'm doing to tackle that problem. There has to be a rational connection between those two things. Your intention, your will, your desire can be as noble as anything. You want to save lives. You want to stop the saliva on the paper from killing lives. Doesn't matter how noble your intention is. Does it actually work? Is there a reason to believe it will work? That is the ultimate test.
You can't try to reduce COVID infections by making Swedish the national language.
Yes, but that is the kind of but this test is fundamentally important to South Africans. I think it should be. It's something that we miss. Our government keeps saying, we want to solve unemployment. We want to solve poverty. We want to solve the pernicious forms of inequality that really are just corruption and rent-seeking, where people who don't add any value at all fatten their buttocks and fly into the Middle East. We want to stop all of that, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Saliva on the paper, make Swedish the national language, change the name of another bridge or street. Like, there's no rational connection. This court ruling, I feel, stands for so much more than just what it stands for. And my last point is that it finds her to be irrational and finds a cost order. And as far as I can understand, it's a cost order against her personally. So she's going to have to fork out a couple of 100,000 rand, maybe even a bar or more, to pay for the other side's counsel, which is very, very important. It's what I tried to do last year when we led a charge into the Constitutional Court in terms of the Dlamini Zuma's attempt to steal the election, again through irrational procedures. And that time we managed to get the Concourt to declare her irrational, but there wasn't a personal cost order. And I haven't checked out the full details, but I know there was a cost order here, and I think it's a personal cost order, and I think that's very important and useful too.
Tiego, I'm sure you're also pretty pleased by this. I don't know. I don't think you are a smoker, but I'm sure this annoyed you as much as it did me.
Well, yeah, I'm not a regular smoker, and it annoyed me quite a lot. But I agree with Gabriel. I think, South Africa is frustrating, man, and the politicians we have in South Africa are quite frustrating because this is something very stupid. Absolutely stupid, plain stupid, and even the minister going back and appealing the judgment after the judgment was given. I don't know what she wants to hear. I mean, they told her quite clearly the arguments you have put forward are not rational, are not logical. Therefore, we are taking this off the line, right, off the books. She still goes back and appeals. One can't get more stupid than that. That's really what I think. That's what I think, yeah.
No, I'm totally with you on that one. I'm very fond of this phrase. You have to sometimes take the L. You have to take the loss. And unfortunately, I think our minister doesn't quite know how to do that. But maybe she'll learn in the future. If she tries to ban cigarettes again or something else equally thick. Okay, so let's move on to our next story. And this is about the Audit General's report, which is, I think, actually just come out. So it found that only 16% of South Africa's municipalities had clean audits. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have corruption. It just means that they filled in all the paperwork, which can be pretty onerous considering all of our anti-corruption laws. But, it's a good start to be able to figure out where all the money has been spent. It's quite important, obviously, for detecting corruption. Only 41 of 257 municipalities received clean audits. Of the 41, 22 were in the Western Cape, 2 were in Gauteng, 5 in the Northern Cape, 4 in the Eastern Cape, 1 in Limpopo, 4 in Mpumalanga, and 3 in KZN. For the 5th year running, not a single Free State municipality has received a clean audit. Only a quarter of municipalities submitted their financial statements to her office on time, which is incredible. And she said that according to compared to 5 years ago, 61 municipalities had improved their audit outcomes, while 56 had regressed. So pretty stale there. But Gabriel, you also just looked up last year's audit outcomes, and it looks like it's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, in terms of clean audits, it was 41, and it has moved all the way to 41. So it's really disappointing. I mean, I think we haven't had a chance to dig into the numbers yet because the report itself is first, I think Tiego was saying, presented to Parliament, and there's been a bit of a press briefing, but the actual document, the full document where you can dive into the numbers yourself, has not yet come out. That'll be still sitting somewhere in embargo. One of the things I like to look at whenever these numbers come out is the Auditor General's assessment of how many municipalities are in financial distress or on the verge of bankruptcy. So you've already got a whole bunch of municipalities that are basically under administration because you've gotten to the stage where no one's filled out the paperwork, no one is showing up at the office, no one can remember who's eaten the money. It's just, there's like nothing happening and there is no money left. And the utilities, Eskom, the water providers are knocking and they're saying, guys, you haven't paid us. You owe us like 400 million rand each. And which is like, takes 5 years to accrue or whatever it is. Where are you? And there's no one answering the address. So once it gets all the way there, a provincial body will step in for administration. And theoretically, it should trigger a new election. And on my reading of how the Constitution is written, it should keep triggering new elections until things get right. So like people who are frustrated should learn to vote for something different when things aren't working. But there's this huge middle ground where you have municipalities that are not getting clean audits, that are not filling out the paperwork properly, but they're not completely defunct. They're accruing more debt, but they are still kind of just managing to hold on, filling out enough paperwork that it maybe makes sense. 2 and 2 equals 5 rather than negative 432 million. And it's those municipalities that you've got to look at because they're the next ones to potentially fall over. The financial distress figures have been climbing through the 2010s, the worst. I think looking at the pandemic period, unlikely to have reformed very much. I think the only thing is more troubling to me than this audit report is I'll just throw in a mention, which is very depressing because it speaks to a broad swathe of the country that usually gets overlooked, the sort of middle South Africa outside of Cape Town and Joburg. The other one is the Small Business Index, Confidence Index. The SACI index for the Purchasing Managers Index just came out, and it's way down. It's the best lead indicator for GDP. So really not looking good for economic growth in the winter of 2022. And those two stories come together, I think, because when the municipalities are not being well run, their best hope of surviving is really that a huge economic boom is going to allow enough to, as it were, paper over the cracks. But we're not seeing that either. So it looks like a tough winter in yet more ways.
Tiego, your thoughts on this? I believe you have some family who at least are maybe were once involved or still involved with some of this auditing process. So I'm sure you know the struggles of trying to get the municipality and the local governments to put their papers in on time.
Yeah, I have a sister who happens to be a manager at the Auditor General, sure. And yeah, she complains a lot about these things, but of course she's not allowed to disclose much of the information. But for me, this is quite concerning that we have only 16% of municipalities that have gotten a clean audit. And I watched the briefing, the media briefing earlier on by the Auditor General, and she was asking where are the CFOs, where are the MMs, where are the MMCs when all of this is happening, when municipalities are failing to deliver necessary documents to the Auditor General so the Auditor General can do its job, when municipalities are failing to record their daily activities as municipalities. But I think I do have the answer for the Auditor General, right? I think she must go and look somewhere in a parking lot at around 7 p.m. She'll find an MM sitting there with some tenderpreneur. She must go and look somewhere at the lodge outside the town. She'll find municipal managers with CFOs sitting with ANC comrades and their friends, exchanging contracts. She must go and look somewhere at a hotel, either in Joburg or in Polokwane. She'll find comrades, MMCs, sitting with some of foreign nationals discussing tenders that, okay, if we give them to you as let's say, Zimbabwean or a Mozambican, then we can get more, we can make more profits because then your split gets to be small. That's a reality of what's happening in South Africa. MMCs, your MMs, your CFOs, all these people are working with the ANC, and where they are right now, they are busy trying to find ways of raising money for the ANC come the December conference. That's where they are.
Right. And this is exactly the consequence of cater deployment, is that you have these completely untenable sort of links between party and state that corrupt everything. Gabriel, sort of 10 seconds or so, any final thoughts on that? Okay.
Yeah, I think go back and listen to the last 3 minutes of what Tiego said again. It's very disturbing.
Yes.
Let it sink in.
And so let's just end off, because it's our last show of the week because of the public holiday tomorrow. Our final story today, some good news. 7 men have been arrested and been given 7 years in prison for stealing 750,000 rands worth of railway tracks. So I'm glad they finally caught someone. And that, I think, is very good news. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please support the IRR by SMSing your name to 32823. And please like the video, leave us good reviews, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful one, everyone. And cheers.